Welcome to Life's a Coach. Our mission is to empower individuals like you to take charge of your life, discover your purpose, and elevate your performance to new heights. Each week, we'll be diving into engaging discussions, introducing you to valuable tools from the coaching world, and giving you different perspectives on individual development. Whether you're seeking clarity, motivation, or a fresh perspective, we've got you covered. Again, welcome to Life's a Coach, where the power to transform your life begins now.
I was telling Sophia in the other room that I kind of came to London, and it's really weird because, you know, I booked my ticket last Wednesday, last minute. I know, very Avril, in very Avril style, just like, you know, like off the cuff. I was just like, I'm going. And like crazy, I booked a ticket from on Saturday, or like it landed on Sunday morning in the mind and body connection. So my body knew that I needed to go to London. I thought like the reason my mind gave me for coming to London was because, we're in the Euros, we're in the Euro final, like I need to go. But that wasn't the reason. Now I know the real reason I needed to come was to reconnect with my family and to spend time with them. And it was like crazy though, because your body knows. So this is like a message to everyone. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts on what your experience with this is that your body knows most of the time what you need to do. So it knows the what usually, right? But it's not good. Your mind's not good at deciphering the why often because there's so much cloud in your judgment. So initially I thought I knew the why, but now after actually just sitting with myself, just kind of grounding a little bit, I find, that I know the real why. Have you guys ever had any of those experiences where you kind of, you felt something so strongly that you needed to do something, but you didn't quite know the why, but you knew that there was a good reason for it? And then how did you explore and figure out that why? That's so important.
Yeah.
I
know. I mean, I'll go quick. Go ahead.
Just comes in. All right. Let me just catch our listeners on what's going on. Who just jumped in? So
I'm laughing. I'm sorry, Avril.
Coach.
Avril, let me just say this.
God.
As you know, I was hearing the podcast yesterday, so one of our previous podcasts, and the same just happened. Eric jumped, and then you said, wait, let's just explain to our listeners.
That's so true.
Oh, it's amazing.
He was like the big brother. He's like the big brother. He's like my big brother. He's just like, okay.
Slow your roll.
Just
a
slow
little
down.
bit.
Slow down.
And Eric's like,
yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Avril, sorry. But it's just so funny.
So for those who have just joined us, welcome to Life the Coach. We usually start off, by having catch up to see how everybody's doing. So we just started we just started recording as we just having conversation. And Eric has just joined us. As you can tell, he came in hot.
it's the best way to do it.
Exactly. Guns blazing. That's how I do.
Awesome. So today we got Alexis, Sophia, and of course Eric, and myself, Avril. And Alexi, you're going to be leaving us soon, so let us know when you're good and ready.
Work and all that.
So you get first dibs at responding to Eric's.
All right. So, I mean, I could probably talk about this for days, I feel like, just because it's a really interesting concept and discussion. I do feel like I've had that just periodically throughout my life, but especially as I started to grow in personal development, it's like you create more awareness. And we talk a lot about that on this podcast because we've all seen the benefits of being more self-aware. So it's interesting that yours is tied to travel in this instance, Eric, because that's generally where mine goes. Mine often is tied to travel because travel is like one of my love languages. I love traveling. I'm a massive advocate. In fact, on the DL, I'm actually working on starting a travel advisor business. So it'll be in the next year or so. But part of that is because when I really sat down with myself and dug deep, I realized I love travel. I love to experience new places and see new things and explore the history and the culture and all of that. But I also realized that a lot of my big life changing moments or realization moments happened while traveling or like as a result of a trip. So, for example, one that really comes to mind is when Sean and I went to Hawaii for the first time. And it was very out of my comfort zone doing a moonlight swim with manta rays. That is scary. Like you're diving into a dark ocean. There are sharks there, in case anyone forgot, among other things, but still. And I mean, they have lights and things, and they make you feel very comfortable and very well supported. You know, the tour group that we went with, Hang Loose Boat Tours, if you're looking, they're amazing. But it was on the way back from there that I had this massive realization of like, I just experienced something that I would be jealous of others doing. And that was me. I'm like jealous of my own life. And it created a new level of self-awareness and self-love that I had never felt. Like literally shed a couple of tears on the boat ride back because I was able to see the old me that I would have talked myself out of it. But I forced myself to move forward. And all of that happened because I knew I just had this calling, like, we need to go to Hawaii. I need to experience it. We financially can afford it. Is it the responsible thing to do at this time? Probably not. We probably should save. Like, we want to
That's
get
exactly
married
how I
one
felt.
day.
That's exactly how I felt. Exactly.
But sometimes you do. You have that calling and you have that, like, I need to be there for some reason. And Hawaii is incredible all around, but the connection, and I know, Sophia, this is really big for you, the connection to nature there is like next freaking level. And I have never felt so connected. And then when we went back the second time, I had the same type of feeling. Like we felt the draw, and it was a different experience. We did some different things, but also I felt like I just kind of had this moment of all I can think of is it's almost spiritual connection to nature, and therefore like it just felt like a grander openness to a lot of things. So I'm a massive advocate that like travel improves you as a person. I wish more people, I wish we all could travel consistently because I feel like it just changes your view on life and on people. And so I'm always a big advocate for it, but I didn't realize like how deep it went until I sat down with myself and started exploring that and recognizing like it's tied to personal development for me. So I know what you're talking about exactly, Eric, and that's also part of why we're here in Texas now. We live here now. Like we just have followed some of those callings, and it doesn't always work out. Like you have to understand that sometimes it's for a lesson and not like a permanent thing. But I think that responsibly, when you can follow that, you absolutely should. That's how I feel about it.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And like before Sophia comes in, I think that part that you spoke about with regards to, I think in those situations, we often get in our own way by trying to use logic too soon, right? Where, you know, as you said, right, I probably shouldn't do this. Like, and that's why I, and probably to a fault in some ways, do it super fast where, you know, some people say, oh, like if you still feel the same in the morning, then you'll book, right? When in actual fact, you're probably not going to book in the morning, right? So it's almost like, hey, I would prefer to go and do it, use your intuition, like, right? There's that feeling in your body of needing to do something, right? And doing it. And then experience it, as you said, and some of it may change. Like, would I have changed? Like, I probably would have extended the trip for a longer period and been a bit more smart with regards to like the logistical parts. But as you said, I will like clue that in next time I have one of these episodes of I need to go and do something, right? Rather than just like holding yourself back, which I think a lot of people do, right? Interesting.
Yeah.
Sophia, any experience of that yourself?
Oh, all the time, I would say. I'm not very good with this. I think
Mhm.
I love what you said, like yes, I really love the connection with nature, but I think that that's the part where you are more, at least for myself, connected with your body also, because there's no distractions. And as
Yes.
we all have been saying, the self-awareness part, this comes a lot with being with yourself, giving time to understand you and understand your body and listening to it. And as more as you work on this, and I wasn't for sure that person like 5 years ago, I totally can relate what I did at that time and what I do now. And my body comes first when saying something to me. And even if I see all the reason that something is right, if my body is telling me something differently, I will listen to it. But going back to the travel and this fast action from Eric to do something, you just know. I think that when you're self-aware and you get that intuition, you just know. The reason, it comes after. As Lexi just said, maybe it's a lesson, but the energy is there. And I think that, although I don't believe that we are destined to destinated to something, um, in a way, I think that some paths are already built or planned, and it depends on the way that we listen to your body and that you listen to your intuition on the journey that you are going to do to be more successful or not for yourself.
Your choice, yeah.
And the choice that you make. And it's interesting that we are jumping in this because I just started to read, and probably you've heard of it, Gabor Mate's book on When the Body Says No. Have you heard of it? And so I'm just in the beginning, but I've heard a lot of podcasts with Gabor Mate, and he's very good on this. He's a physician, so he was a lot into this part of just understanding the physical body and everything. But then, in some period of his life, he started to understand how sick people, where they got the sickness from, and it's mostly related with emotions, trauma, and things that we've been through. So the body always knows. I think that Eric started this way, and I think that's completely true. There's no separation, right? So
Absolutely. And I think with what you're saying there, Sophia, it comes back to the experience that I've had this week, right? Of like, again, I've been on an inner child journey, and listening to Gabor Mate, he was one of the first people that, you know, really got me to think about the inner child, your trauma, and how that affects your being and your, you know, your life really growing up, right? So, you know, walking around in London, right? Just where I live here, it's a place called Enfield. And when I was growing up, and you don't notice this at the time, right? Because you're just trying to survive. But now coming back by myself, you know, and just walking the streets, I kind of did this beautiful meditation. Like last week, I've been tapping into my inner child and really trying to, you know, listen to that voice, right? And really have that inner child voice within me, to kind of be able to differentiate when, for example, the adult me or the inner child me is kind of at the driving seat, so to speak. So long story short, I was able to kind of integrate, I would describe it, my inner child within my being a little bit. And my safe space, just to kind of like let you guys know, it's weird. It's like kind of this beach on Mauritius where my family is from. And I kind of meet my inner child underneath a tree, and I kind of see his face, And it's kind of like, it's a crazy feeling of just almost listening to what that inner child wants, like, and going for a walk with your inner child. So I've kind of been tapping into this for like the past 2-3 weeks, right? 1 or 2 meditations a week, almost just kind of listening to that and having that conversation. And as I was here, actually yesterday, I was walking back from the gym, and I noticed that this road I used to walk on in London was a road that I'd always take from school. So it's like up a hill, down, really busy, street. And I kind of thought to myself, let me try and kind of connect with my inner child, like, and kind of almost experience it through his eyes. So I kind of was experiencing it. And I remember when I was younger, the feeling of like real fear and like worry, like on the streets in London,
Yeah.
Averill spoke about, his family member, you know what I mean? And, in England, like I grew up in when a lot of that kind of violence, gang violence and stuff like that was first starting, and we didn't quite understand it, what it meant. But when I was younger, I was really worried, really scared of those types of things happening. They used to happen a lot, a lot of knife violence and gang violence and things like that. So I was constantly in this mode of fight or flight. Do you know what I mean? Basically, like I was always ready to run away, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of like experiencing this, but like almost from the outside. It's weird. Like I'm not the person, but I'm seeing my inner child like walk through these streets and like imagining like how they would be reacting. And then I'm able to just talk to him a little bit and just say, you're safe. It's fine. Do you know what I mean? You're okay. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like re-experiencing those same environments, those same experiences. It's a little bit scary, but like it's an amazing experience, because those are the things that Gabor Mate that are holding us back in our relationships, both at work and in our, you know what I mean, in our lives, where that trigger point of feeling of when somebody says to you, shut up, or when someone says to you that you're acting childish, that instant reaction is the child coming back out again, right? Because of whatever experience you've had, again, usually with your caregiver. So it was like kind of like that journey of with the inner child, but also with my parents. Like I had a great conversation with my dad, and basically I asked him, hey, what do you remember of me as a child? Do you know what I mean? And like just having that conversation with him. And he's not like, he's not a very open person. Do you know what I mean? Like we've never had these types of discussions, but through coaching, right, really, like I'm able to have these discussions and like really seek to learn and understand more. So yeah, it was just like, that gave me a whole different sense of meaning of why I came to London and just everything.
Wow.
I wanted to share with you guys for sure. It's crazy, yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's powerful.
It is. It is. I'm so happy for you, Eric, that you get to experience this. And both the things that you brought to the table right now, they deserve their own podcast. You know what I'm saying? We could talk about just
For real.
the whole intuition side of like, you just know you got to do something. It doesn't make sense up here, and you do it, and you find out like, oh, okay, there was a reason for that. That's a whole podcast on itself. And the inner child, the work that you're talking about, I love the way you're processing it too. Like being able to, as if you're stepping outside of yourself and watching your little boy go through all that. And then you get to come back and tell him it's safe. That in itself, that's inner child work. When you go into that place and just, you get to tell your inner kid that, hey, we're safe now. We got this. Oh, I got you. So I'm happy you're having this realization and you're walking
Thank
through all
you.
this. It's
I'm
beautiful.
so excited to share with you all, because obviously just that resonance, I think a lot of people may not truly understand or felt that deeply or looked that deeply with it. So I think us being able to kind of frame that for people and explain in a way that's understandable and doable for themselves, right? And I think how important it really is just to connect with yourself, right? It's just as Alexis said previously, connect with that part of you that perhaps you haven't. And it's again that body that mind-body connection, right? It's kind of like trusting your initial reaction, that intuition, no matter how strange or weird it might make you feel. Oftentimes we don't want to listen, right? Why do we not want to listen? Why are we so eager to, just like find reasoning, rationale uh, behind our feeling? Like we have such a strong feeling. I think we just need to learn to trust that, right? It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's crazy.
Definitely.
Yeah, I wanna jump in here because I know that there are people listening that are probably a lot like me. So I'm gonna raise my hand and say I tend to be, this is kind of weird, but I tend to be like not so, I don't really I don't really believe in everything that people say about the inner child work. Now, let me go a little bit deeper with that. It it's probably a personal somehow trigger that like I haven't discovered yet, but I also feel like, and I'm sure some listeners or viewers are going to relate to this, that it just feels like too much. It feels like it's fake or it's inaccurate or it's an excuse, or, and I get it because I do feel that way. I think some people lean on it too heavily as an excuse. And they're just like, this is because of, my inner child, this or that. And it gives it kind of a bad rep. Now, with that, I will say I literally had an epiphany, Eric, while you were talking about my own trigger of like, when Sean and I are having a disagreement, and Sean and I do not yell and scream at each other because we both grew up in homes where our parents did that and ended in divorce and so on. So when we first started dating, that was one of the first things we talked about. We will not be that couple that is yelling and screaming at each other. We are adults. We need to talk things out and do our best to try and just keep emotions as close to level as we can. But I realized as you were just talking, and I don't even know exactly what it was that you said, but it was literally like light bulb of, I think, because I get the fight or flight feeling when I feel like Sean is mad at me. And it's like, why? I'm not afraid of him. It's not a physical thing, but I'm afraid of something. Is it afraid of abandonment? But why? Like, I'm very close with my dad still, and I was extremely close to my mom, even though they got divorced. And, okay, I had some traumatic things with my sister kind of growing up where she was really mean to me and, used to physically hurt me sometimes or whatever. But I realized that it was kind of that tie to divorce and that tie to my parents separating despite loving each other. Many years later, it was found out that my dad was actually going to come back, and at the very time he was going to come back, my mom served him with divorce papers. And they both loved each other still continuously. So it's like a signaled heartbreak. And I think that just as you were talking, it was like I realized, oh, this is one of those triggers and this is one of those things. So I just think what I'm trying to say is like you have to be open to it, but this is not meant to be like an excuse that you get to just like excuse yourself out of things or for acting a certain way. It's an explanation, certainly. But even when Sean and I do have a disagreement and it's getting a little more heated, thankfully now, even though I hate it, he will call me out on some things and he'll say, see, this is why I don't usually like to tell you this or this, because you get defensive. And I don't want you to feel like you need to be defensive, but this is where we are. This is how you react sometimes. And now I realize that that's part of it, is because of that almost fear of abandonment, because it signaled, fighting growing up signaled divorce. So it's really interesting, but I kind of wanted to play the devil's advocate a little bit to say, like, people are going to hide behind this, and that's not okay. That's not what this is about. The whole point is digging deeper and discovering and addressing things. And I think that it's just the way some people use it. It's almost a bit of a trigger word or trigger phrase to me, because I'm like, oh boy, here we go. You
And
know?
can I just say, I think
Right.
with that, I think as well, I think it's beautiful that you're in a relationship where, because relationships can either take you further away from understanding yourself and gaining self-awareness, and other relationships can take you closer to actually being in enough of a safe and secure place that you can, like, again, look internally, right? Because again, as you said, right, with when you, let's say, react in a certain way, and perhaps a partner, you or anyone, right, a partner kind of themselves go very defensive because they're also dealing with their
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, past trauma, or just their their
Challenges,
defensiveness,
yeah.
right? Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Whatever it may be, you're kind of fighting against each other, right, in that way. So as we very much do in coaching, holding space for somebody and reflecting back just kind of
Yep.
what you're seeing, and then you as well being open enough, because if someone you know was to call you defensive again, if you're not self-aware enough, and you're not able to kind of take a minute to accept that, then that might be very difficult
You get
to
even more
navigate that
defensive.
conversation. Exactly, right? So it's
Yeah.
a downward spiral. It's a downward spiral. So I think that's beautiful, and that just triggered what you said. It triggered something in me of relationships, of how certain relationships can either take you down one path or take you down the other. And I think you really
Yeah.
need that. You really need that in your life. You need
You
people
do.
who are, because it's very difficult to figure that out yourself, because it's very much the relational part of being a human being, right? Very
Mm-hmm.
rare are you really going to be able to figure out the past trauma and things like that apart from talking to a coach or a therapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or in your relationships with those closest to you, who are willing to give you space and to let you open up.
Right. Willing
Mm.
to have deep conversations like this, like we have, that we're very lucky
100%.
to have.
That's why I love it every single week.
I would like to just respond to what you said, Eric, and work my way backwards to what Lexi said too. My 2 cents on that, what you just said about relationships, Eric, is you're spot on. And at times you notice that it doesn't matter at times how much self-work, self-development one does on themselves. There are certain things that can and will only be triggered when you're in a relationship. All right. So I've had seasons in my life, and I've noticed it in people where it happened to me, and it happened to some of my people that I know, where you are in this relationship and stuff comes up, all right? And when you leave that relationship, they're like, oh, I'm doing all this work on myself to maybe work on dot 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 dot. And you do. It doesn't mean that time when you're single, you're not really developing yourself and making yourself a top-notch person. You do. But then there's certain things that are lie dormant. They can only be worked on because they're brought out when you're in a relationship, and typically things like that. A lot of the things that come up are related to our upbringings and the traumas and the things that we went through, and they only come up in relationships. So I'm just saying all this to say you're spot on, Eric, in that, relationships are a good place for self-awareness. You can use things that come up to get to know yourself more as well, kind of thing. And going back to what you said, Lexi, is that I totally, I love and I appreciate the fact that you just put it out there too. Some of our listeners will relate to the fact that they cannot either connect to what inner child work is or what inner child is, and also there are people who abuse that. Oh, I'm doing this because of my inner child. Da, da, da. It's the same thing as certain people say, oh, I'm a Scorpio or I'm a Libra, then I'm supposed to act like this. It's like, no,
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
people take advantage of that as well to get away with stuff. But and also the other flip side to it is like also I love the fact that in Life's a Coach, you got 6 different coaches, different niches and different backgrounds, different upbringings, which means that how you feeling, Lexi, about this? There's someone out there who relates with it. We kind of bring in that perspective of someone's representing someone else out there. So there's no right or wrong here in regards to, if you don't vibe with that, and if it doesn't relate to you or resonates, that's beautiful in itself. You know, you're representing someone out there who feels the same way as you do. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just
Thank
wanted
you
to
for
validate
saying
that and
that.
just saying that. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Because if I can be honest, even just sharing that and kind of going against the grain was actually something that I wouldn't have even done a few years ago, because I would have felt the need to like continue to belong here. And I thought, you talk about that, your body having the calling, Eric, that was what we started with. I had that right then, where I was like, I have to say this, as uncomfortable as it makes me. I'm going to say this on a call with a bunch of coaches that I fully respect. I'm going to kind of disagree a little bit, but I realize even just by sharing it, it's because it does get overused and abused in a lot of ways. So yeah, thank you for that.
No, for sure. For sure.
I completely agree. By the way, that it is a reason used by people not to go deeper, right? And an excuse for how they act or how they react. Oh, why do you always scream at your kids, or why do you always get so defensive when this happens? Oh, it's because when I was a kid, my parents didn't give me time, to express myself. You know what I mean? Like, you're absolutely right. It probably shouldn't be used for those reasons, right? It's probably should be used, as you're saying, to go a little bit deeper into understanding yourself, right? But for anyone else, I think it can be a tough road, right? Because it's for me, the idea behind inner child work is really building that relationship allows you to give your inner child what you needed, what they needed when they were younger, right? Because a lot of those things manifest as when we're older, right? They become our fears and our worries. So, but no, I completely agree with Lex about what she said.
So for me, I want to say that said, though, for those who resonate with it too, is that, and those people who don't use it, I mean, okay, I'm a spiritual and holistic life coach, right? Even in that world too, I've started seeing a lot of people misabuse that, oh, it's my spirituality, oh, because we are this, or it's like that, or anything used out of balance is becomes toxic, right? There has to be balance in everything, right? And at times it's clear, even talking about the body knows the score, or what you said earlier on about intuition. Sometimes it's clear when you see somebody, if they're giving their share, like, okay, it's evident. You can see someone when they're talking about whatever it is, whether it's inner child, horoscope, whatever, you can tell when someone's now just using that as an excuse, right? But for those that are actually using those tools for exactly what they are, and if I can explain it myself, how I see inner child work, it's like there are things that happen to us when we're kids, right? That for me, it's sort of like closely related to shadow work too. But there are things that happen to us when we're kids that I guess someone once defined inner child to me as a part of you that was left at a certain place in your childhood with an experience that you haven't moved on from, right? So maybe it's my high school sweetheart when she dumped me at 16 or whatever, right? Then there's a part that staged there that affects the way I feel about other women, or how, if I want to approach another girl and ask her out, like it's stuck there, right? Or it could be something that I misinterpreted. Like my kid, there are moments, my kid is really funny, right? She's 7 and she's got a great sense of humor. But there are moments when she cracks a joke, right? And me and her mom, we laugh, right? Then all of a sudden she pulls back and goes, "Daddy, you are laughing at me." So she's in her little eyes, she's interpreting that I'm laughing at her, not laughing with her or laughing at the joke that she did, right? So it's easy for her as well to just take that and it would be imprinted in her that Daddy was laughing at me, You know what I'm saying? Then later on in life, she's a great comedian, but still she feels she can't say stuff because people are going to laugh at her, you know? And that kind of stuff always shows up in relationships. This could be like friendships, romantic relationships, work relationships, even to the point where some people, and I've heard a story of a lady who just had issues relating to her boss, right? Or male figures in authority. But when she started doing, she said, no, when she was young, her dad said this, and any man who speaks in a certain tone or raises his voice in a certain way triggers that part for her. And all of a sudden she goes back to becoming that little 12-year-old kid, you know? So there are different tools to work with that kind of stuff that we all have from our childhood. And for some, it may be inner work. For some, it may be shadow works. For some people, it may be somatic work and all this kind of stuff. Some is going to talk to coaches. Some is talking to therapists. So we may throw these words around: inner child, shadow work. These are all just tools of how to work with those parts of us that are still blocked or not expressed, that are stuck in the back, that we need to come back and for our self-awareness. Because like you're saying, the whole thing about coaching and what we are big on Life's a Coach is self-awareness, right? And for us to be more self-aware, it means sometimes going back to our past to see where this started or what this is about, you know? So that's just what I wanted to say about that, my little contribution to that.
Thank you, April.
Yeah.
For
I
sure.
wanted to go back just to try to make a connection here with what Lexi said and Eric said, and now you, April, also. Because what I hear or see is sometimes people, and we will have listeners that are very self-aware, are not self-aware, are very into this kind of knowledge and seeking, and others that are just curious. And sometimes people relate trauma or things in childhood that were very big, like parents screaming at home, violence, physical abuse, things like that. But I also learned recently that can be just a small situation, like your parent being late one day to get you from school, and then can make you feel abandoned for the rest of your life. And then you react to this with the relationships, as all of you were saying. And then people will go, but my parents were great and nothing happened in my childhood. What's happening with me? And I just wanted to make this insight for people that sometimes you will not have a big situation in your life to disclose what you've been feeling or the way that you are in relationships. Sometimes it was something so small as your parent being late, or one friend that took your preferred toy from your hand, things like that. But it's just, and now going back to the initial part of our conversation, to listening to your body. What is it trigger? What do you feel? What is the trigger that makes you react? Or when you say, ooh, you just came out of nowhere with this kind of reaction, it's never out of nowhere. It's somewhere and it's inside you. So I just wanted to, I was hearing to all of you and I was thinking, yeah, but we are all into this kind of knowledge and we understand what we are saying to each other. But for everybody out there, maybe it's just about small things. Your childhood may be perfect. It's never perfect, but it was brilliant and you really enjoyed all the times with your parents or your caregivers. But then maybe just one thing, it was different and impacted you.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you for saying that, Sophia, because sometimes it is small things.
Absolutely. And I love how you said trigger as well, right? Because that's really what it is, how it's manifested, right? In our, there's a reason why it, as you say, triggers a part of us at a certain moment when a specific action happens. That being said, I think at times it can also be difficult to pinpoint the exact moment that we established said trauma, right? So that's why I don't know why, but I really struggle to remember my past, like my childhood, like vast amounts of my childhood. I remember parts, but you know, I really struggle to remember like large portions of my childhood, right? So I would struggle with those types of moments. I remember little triggers here and there. That's why, for example, when I'm having this conversation with my dad in the car on the way back, from dinner, I asked him, right, what do you remember of me as a child, right? Because I think asking your loved ones, right, can actually be a really good process for beginning to understand, okay, perhaps there was something that you were missing or part of what you were missing. Perhaps, as Avril said with his daughter, you misinterpreted as a lack of love or whatever. Like, I remember a trigger for me, and it was brought up when Sophia said kind of about, parents like not picking up and things like that. For whatever reason, I was very much like fear of abandonment when I was younger, and that was like very much clear. Like, I was a sleepwalker, from a young age. I was always like, always worried about, parents weren't coming home and things like that. And I remember a trigger of waking up in the middle of the night, and kind of my mum had gone to the gym, and my dad basically had a workshop at the back of the house. Right, so someone was home, but I felt that feeling of being alone, right? So I would have to like kind of get up onto a ledge and knock on the window so that he could hear me from the workshop, which is like the next building across. And like I said, with these memories that I have, that's a very vivid memory because it's a traumatic experience, right, for me. So I remember that very vividly. I remember I could come back to it immediately, like in a meditation or something like that. But as you said, now that I'm a parent as well, and I understand kind of, hey, like sometimes I kind of feel like, oh, let me just take Luca to the apartment gym where I live and he can just kind of play and I can work out because, like, you know what I mean? Like, and so that helps me frame that, hey, like, was my mum really being a bad mum by wanting to go to the gym? No, she spent the whole day with me, getting me dressed for school, picking me up, doing everything what I needed to do. And when I'm asleep, she's now going to try and go to the gym. And like my dad as well, same thing, like, providing for me and working in his workshop now late at night, like 9, 10 o'clock. Does that make him a bad person? No, right? It was just me interpreting the fact that there was no one there physically to, to take care of me, to, coddle me, whatever you want, right? So I think that is, as you said, it's not always so clear. So two things there, right? It's like kind of, I think we don't need to be so worried about the exact feeling or moment. Oh, it was this time when my brother said these words, at Thanksgiving on this day, and ever since then I felt this, this, and this. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't need to be like that, right?
Yeah.
It's the general. Okay, I have a fear of abandonment because, when my parents used to leave me, I was really worried that they weren't going to come home. It was an irrational thought that I got, right? I think that's enough because then, like, I'm a big believer in reparenting your inner child, or whatever you want to call it. And, you can call that spiritual, you can call it not, whatever you want to say it, you can call it self-talk, right? Self-talk for psychologists. You guys know that I'm a very much a, sports psychology and very much about the mind and science and all that. So however you want to call it, basically you are coaching yourself to not have things that are going to hold you back, basically, right? In the most basic form and the most practical form, right? Because we want to make this practical for listeners, right? And not the abstract of, that story that I told about me walking hand in hand with my inner child. It doesn't need to be like that, right? It just almost needs to be that deeper awareness, So super interesting.
Well, and one thing, it'll be real quick, April, because then I want to hear what you're saying. But one thing too that I heard or felt from you, Eric, when you were sharing about that is the additional work that now needs to kind of be done to relearn what alone feels like, because you've already attached a negative feeling to it. Like, through not your own fault, like it just was your reaction. So and now true. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to literally retrain my brain on what this feels like, because your ego has now stepped in and is like, no, being alone signifies horribleness and miserable life and fear and all of these feelings. It makes, I don't know if anybody has seen Inside Out 2 yet,
Not yet,
I've heard it's
Oh.
very good.
but I've
my
heard
God,
it's like
please.
amazing. Yeah.
It's like my brain. Literally, everybody says that, but like
Everyone says that, yeah.
really, yeah. And I think that I loved the first one.
Yeah,
I
me
was
too.
super
Mhm.
moved,
Mhm.
but like I was literally emotional in the theater at
Mhm.
by the end of the second
Another
film.
friend actually said that they got emotional too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
was
Same.
it was incredibly moving, and like you just felt seen. And when you
Mm.
really feel seen and you're like,
Mhm.
I'm seen up there, like they get it. And it was also just really helpful from a practical standpoint because they address certain things about anxieties and stuff. So yeah, it just reminded me of that. So anybody listening, if you haven't seen it yet, you better go watch it because it's
I need to.
incredibly insightful. But yeah, just really interesting to like have to relearn, and that's it's not just actions. Like it could just be a word or a feeling that you have to relearn somehow and change what your RAS is signaling that means. You know, it's like if you put a negative connotation around alone or marriage or whatever it might be, then you have to recalibrate it.
Yeah.
Just explain that quickly so for our listeners that don't understand reticular activating system, what that is and why that is that relevant.
Yeah. So the reticular activating system is basically it's almost like a filter inside your brain that it is helping filter in and out things that you're telling your mind are important to you. So an example is if you're constantly focused on the negative in your life, or if I know a prime example is always like you're car shopping and you're really interested in a blue truck, and all of a sudden you start seeing blue trucks all over the place. They were always there, but your RAS is like filtering other things in because we have so many things going on around us, thoughts and people and places and all of this. We can't see or interpret all of it in our brain. We would die. It would just be too much. It would burn us out. And so your RAS is there as kind of like a lint trap in your dryer or that filter where it's saying, oh, well, they're constantly thinking about blue trucks now. I'm going to show them more of that. So that's why, like, when people say positive thinking really works, it's a way of like retraining your RAS.
Just that's the scientific definition of manifestation, basically, right? Of
Yep.
What everyone says is just the abstract. What I think is what I see. In many ways, there is a part of your brain that is specifically was made for that or evolved that way. So it's very interesting.
It's a good way to try and experiment with yourself. And one big thing, one big note: don't do don'ts or
No
no's. Your
negatives.
RAS, your RAS does not interpret that.
Don't think of a pink elephant.
Yeah.
Or you're thinking.
Right. Or if you're like trying to just, maybe you're trying to get healthy and you're like, don't beat yourself up because you're not sticking to your diet this week. Like, don't do that. Or I'm not going to do this or something. Like, it has to be a positive statement. Like, I'm going to eat healthy this week. Something like that.
Got it. No, I get it. That's why most affirmations are like speaking the positive or speaking what you are calling in your life and not saying I don't want to do, not negating what you don't want to, what's going on in your life.
Exactly.
I got you. Yeah. I just wanted to jump back to something that Eric was saying earlier on about that vivid memory he has about his as a kid where his mom went to the gym and his dad was in the workshop next door, and how now he's got a different frame of mind as how he relates to that to how he related to it as a kid. I had quite a healing experience for me, I think 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, where I went shopping with my kid and I went shopping with my kid's mom, right? So between me and her, we're kind of like prepping stuff for her for school, right? So between her mom and I, we have a criteria of the things that we want to get and why we want to get those clothes, right? And we also have a time frame that, okay, we're going to Target, we're going to be in and we're going to be out within this frame of time, right? So I had a moment where I just stepped back and I just watched her and her mom interact, right? And there's something that she wanted and she really wanted it. And her mom said no, right? Now, listen, all day, everything she had said was just yes, 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 yes. This one thing she wanted, then the mom said no, right? And she's like, kind of thing. Then I also backed up the mom. I was like, yeah, no, we're not getting that, right? And in that moment, I had an epiphany. I was like, wow, I remember a version of myself when I was a kid, and I went shopping with my mom, and she said no to something that I wanted, right? And I had these feelings of just, oh man, she just wants me to get what she wants. She doesn't want me to get what I want, and all this kind of stuff, right? But in that moment, I got to see an understanding of, wait, my mom probably had the criteria she was working with too. She had a budget she was working with too. She had all these things. Like, there are things that there's no way in my kid version would have understood where my mom was coming from. All right. So I had a moment of like, oh, I literally get the two. I can't say it's precisely exactly that's what those were my reasons my mom had, but I got an understanding of, wow, I got to appreciate her and the patience she had with me and the understanding and love that she was putting in the situation, even to the point that she said no. It's like, wow, I got to understand that from her perspective. And that though it wasn't the exact situation, it got to rewire something in my brain about that experience, you know. And at the same time, I could totally get and understand where my kid's coming from. It's like, wait, this is just a 7-year-old kid. She don't know anything else but 7-year-old stuff, right? So if you just come into a world, you can see that her not getting this particular shoe is the same as me not getting a certain paycheck I'm expecting. Like, what's
Right.
important to me? It's like it's as huge and drastic and dramatic to her as my own adult life issues. So just being able to see that her experience through my adult perspective and tapping back into my childhood experience with my mom, I felt that just brought a little bit of healing with me in regards to that area, you know. So that's just my experience that I had a few weeks back. Thought I just
Wow.
throw it in
Thank you
there.
so much, Ariel.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Have you done anything differently with your daughter after that thought of yours and where it landed for you?
Differently, there's a lot of stuff that her mom and I are doing differently from how we were raised, right? And even with that, I think there's an understanding that I recently got. You know, there's a podcast I do with a very close brother of mine, a best friend of mine, called Mandate, where we just discuss man issues, right? And there's one thing that came up that surprised me that I can say here is that, it doesn't matter. It looks to me like it doesn't matter how much work, like let's say right here we're all coaches, right? How much inner work and work we do on ourselves to better ourselves as parents, right? I can be the best dad ever, but like I gave you that example earlier on, my kid is gonna somehow always have some kind of thing that she may or may not be lying down on a therapist's couch and have daddy issues. Did you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Regardless of the work that I've done. So what I'm realizing is that even when I look back at my parents, they did the best they knew with what they had at the level of consciousness and awareness that they were at, right? We're doing all this work to be aware and self-conscious so that we don't pass down traumas and just lash out at our kids and not knowing why we're doing it, and even communicating to them. Like, my daughter and I communicate to our kid, trying to give her reasons and trying to explain stuff to her so she knows. Whereas the way we were raised, just like, I said no and it's no, and you don't know why your parent says no, and you have to live with that. So there's a level of consciousness that a lot of parents are doing nowadays to try and bridge that gap. And still, at some point, the level of consciousness of
Yeah.
my kid and her kids and their kids' kids is going to be different. So all I can say with that is like, yeah, I'm doing a whole lot different, right, for my kids than I got. And I'm doing the best that I know with the level that I'm at, to make it as best as it can be for her and our dynamic. And also, I think I'm also just coming to that place as well of understanding, like, you know what, I can always do the best. She will, and she may turn out great, or she may not, but I know that I've done the best that I know.
I,
I like to believe I'm leaving her a better person with
yeah,
my journey.
I'm
I love
sure.
that, and I love where you went,
Uh-huh.
Avril, because that sentence was in my head while you were speaking. That it's good to acknowledge that our parents, our caregivers, did the best
Mhm,
that they could with the
mhm,
tools and the self-awareness and whatever the consciousness that they had at that moment. Because in this moment, you're trying to do the same, the best that you can.
mhm,
But maybe in 20
mhm.
years' time, your kid is going to
Exactly.
say, "But my dad, la la la," but you did the best. So I think that this is very
Mhm,
important in society and for all of us who deal with these kinds of things. And I think everybody deals with these things is don't blame. I'm very into
mhm,
this now. Don't blame. Try to do the best that you can with what you have right now to make it better
mhm,
for yourself. But stop that mind of blaming the parents, blaming the people that were with you when you grew up. You have the opportunity now to do differently. Do the best that you can
mhm,
to do it differently.
mhm.
So I love where
Hmm.
you went. Thank you. Thank you so much, Avril, for sharing.
Yeah.
One thing I love about us is that that's why we started this whole, as soon as we all jump in, plus record, because we just like
Yep.
checking in. Yo, how was your week? Before we even get to the topic of the day, we're like, yo, how was your week? Oh,
What
my
was
week
the
was this
topic of
then.
the day?
And my
Yeah.
week was like this. And as we share how each other's week has been, things come up, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, such a beautiful conversation.
Hmm.
Definitely. And
So,
this is
yeah.
life's a
Best
coach,
friends.
right? So this is all about
Hmm.
life. And that's where we
Hmm.
Yes.
start always with life, and then we bring everything else to the topic.
We all bring the coaching and stuff to the for real.
Yeah,
For
Exactly.
real.
definitely.
Yep.
Yes.
Love it.
Oh. Well, it's been amazing to hang out with y'all coaches.
Yes.
Sure
I
has.
always get
Final
all sorts of
thoughts?
insights and uh from every time we sit together and on this. Yes, final thoughts,
Definitely.
as Sophia says,
Go, Sophia.
or anything.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Let's start with you,
I
Sophia.
started just to not be the first. No, really, guys, thank you. As I was mentioning before we start recording, yesterday I was listening to one of our podcasts, and um, my final thought, it's not a final, it's probably the thought that I have all the time. This time with you all is amazing, and I know that it's probably just once a week, but it seems like I'm with you all the time because then next
Mhm,
week we will meet again and we
mhm,
keep on going. So, and to our listeners, even if you just have, and now I'm going back to Eric, what you said about being with your family and time with your friends and everything. If you only have
mhm,
one time a week with a friend or someone that you can go and be yourself, and Eric, I'm going back to you
mhm,
again with this, and be honest to yourself, be your authentic one, enjoy that time and be present because it makes all the days in the week that you are not able to do this or being um, so free. I would use freedom here. Um, totally worth it. This hour or 2 hours or something like
Absolutely. I'm going to go back to something that Alexa said, where she said reframing what lonely feels like, right?
that. Mm.
Again, I've said this before. Um, I think it's, again, Jay says, loneliness is the weakness of being alone, whereas solitude is the strength of being alone. Um, you could be with hundreds of people a week, um, and not resonate. And I think that has to do with frequency and if they're on the same wavelength as you, right? And I lived that for a very long time, right? I would say that I had a lot of friends, but again, I would never be able to go this deep with them. So I think finding time, as you said, to see what your energy's like. I think it's all about energy. When you are able to enter a conversation, or like for us, a podcast, and you come in with a certain level of energy and you leave with either more energy or at least more perspective than you came in with, then that's probably a relationship that is feeding you, right? Rather than the numerous relationships or friendships that we have that we enter with less energy that we entered with. So I would just try to figure that out and find the relationships that really are serving you.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think one thing that keeps coming to mind for me on a lot of what we've talked about is choice. And I know, Sophia, you were just talking about kind of that recommendation of if you can get with your family or your friends, even for a short period of time, and Eric along the same lines of re-energizing, it's like that recharge time and relationship. And to me, this session with you all, it's a bit of a reminder because I've been neglecting a lot of my own self-care. And so having this time with you is a form of self-care for me. And it just like helps you explore different parts of your mindset. And so it reminded me of, we all have these choices. And one of the big ones for me, work has been super, super crazy for me, just very draining, very busy, and not super happy with it. And I finally had to get to that point where I was like, but I have the choice to be happy, period.
Yeah.
And to be grateful, period. And to try and find other areas of your life to invoke more of that gratitude, more of that hope and joy. And one of those is making that choice to spend that time with someone that, especially that you are just that super authentic person. So I would say just be mindful of not only the choices that you're making, but your opportunities to make a different choice that supports more growth and even self-awareness. Because it was like I forgot. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that, where it's like you forgot such an elementary level like choice where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, but I can choose not to be that
Mm-hmm.
stressed right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like you forget about it, and then when you have it, it's like massive mind-blowing epiphany. So just a quick reminder, like you can choose not to feel that way.
I think for me, it was something that came out of you, Lexi, sharing about your connection with inner child work. For me, it's just a reminder that we are all different and we resonate and don't resonate with different things. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with being the only one who resonates with something or not resonating with something, and we should always be okay with that. There's no right or wrong when it comes to people's experiences. Everybody has their own truth. So just a reminder of that. I think that's my take away from today's, amongst the many other things y'all shared, which were flipping amazing. So, wow, what a beautiful one.
Definitely.
Great as always.
As always.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Love it.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on Life's a Coach, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Life's a Coach, where our conversations aim to empower and support your personal growth. Until next time, remember that personal development is ongoing, so keep exploring, keep learning, and keep living a life that aligns with your true purpose. Take care, and we'll see you on the next episode of Life's a Coach.